if you take the average American and put him or her in a motel room with no television, no radio, no USA Today, no reading matter for 24 hours, why, he would be coming to me, a therapist, to deal with me. He would be driven up the wall. I am dismayed by the extent to which the university today has slipped into well, my word for it is scientistic mode, which in this context means simply the only kind of knowledge which is reliable and worthwhile and so on is objective knowledge which you can empirically prove and so on. I think retreats are immensely important. All the spiritual leaders not only were launched through them, but kept going back. Jesus would go and pray all night, a kind of withdrawal. Toynbee called it withdrawal and return. If we don't withdraw, we have nothing to return with.
And in the south of India, there's a 71, 72-year-old man, Sai Baba, who is attracting global attention.
Maynard Ferguson has been for 20 years or so a devotee, and Maynard, Sai Baba said to him on one occasion, I know that you're a very famous trumpeter, and I can believe that, and I don't know if he had heard him play, but he said, your music still needs a little more light. And so I'm going to give you this ring so that when you play it, why then from the lights that are playing on you, it will sparkle and it will give more light in the moon. With that, he produced the largest diamond that Maynard had ever seen and handed it to him.
Welcome to Souljourns, and to the story of globally prominent author and professor Huston Smith, the author of The World's Religions, reputed to be one of the greatest selling books of all times, next to the Bible, and acclaimed as a brilliant synopsis of Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. This is the first Souljourns interview recorded in 1997 in Berkley, California.
Huston Smith, first of all, I want to tell you what a pleasure it is. Indeed, it's an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you candidly and to invite you to share with us.
Actually, as far back as I can remember, I think I would have to define myself as a seeker. I think what I mean by that is that, again, as far back as I can remember, it was the big questions that loomed for me. Now, I don't know what I'm talking about. 9 years old, 6 years old, 12 years old. I can't factor it out that way. But who are we? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? What are we supposed to be doing, if anything, while we're here? I mean, those kind, if you want to put it in a negative light, you might say these kind of brooding questions. That doesn't mean that I wasn't interested in fishing and flying kites and all the other things, but nevertheless, that kind of aspect, I can't remember a time when it wasn't there.
And did you ever get to the point in your life, whether this first struck you when you were 9 or 29, did you ever get to the point in your life when you felt satisfied that you found the correct answers to most of those questions?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I find I have to answer it in two parts. With regard to the general trajectory, why, I would again say that whether it was instilled into me by my parent, my home life, or whether I came to it. No, probably more I was conditioned to it. The trajectory has always seemed pretty clear and in place. And the other half, the second half is, of course, the specifics. One can know that this is generally west, but then the refinements with the compass and things like that, those bristle, and I don't think they ever go away. So it's that two parts. The general trajectory has really never been in serious question for me, but then, okay, which precise degree do I turn to the left or the right on this occasion, this problem, this stage in life? Those, I think, are with us to the very end.
Are you comfortable talking about your own spiritual take on life, which may be changing from week to week or decade to decade, that isn't strictly of an academic nature?
Oh, I'm very much involved with that. My entire life has been professionally in the university, but personally in the search and on the path. So the interface between those has been an enduring constant through the years. Now, let me try to see what you're trying to tease out from me. Have I been comfortable? What, say something more.
Okay, what's your opinion on this, the media's concentration on what we think of as being new spirituality, knowing that there's nothing new?
Right. Now, I'm being very informal and casual. I'll be very glad and to speak to that, but I realized that I lost track of your previous question because, and put it to you, whether to go back to that, and that is whether I have felt that my spiritual interest in life has been out of place on the campus. So shall I say a word about that before going to the New Age?
Also, Huston, I just want to say, one thing Ted's asking is for your permission to ask you questions about your personal beliefs. We would like to learn from what you've learned.
Well, you feel free.
Thank you.
So these two,
like saying I'm in the public domain, whatever that comes to, large laughter.
So back to spirituality on a campus of academic pursuit.
Well, Bill Moyers asked me that and pushed me pretty hard on that question, and I was glad that he did. He asked if I felt at times like I was going the wrong way on a one-way street. You may recall that question. And no, I never thought that I was going the wrong way. Now the others may see, but no, let me just say at the start, the university has been very good to me. And I cannot, with all the flaws I keep reiterating, and I think we ought not to gloss over, I can't imagine a vocation that would have given me as much personal satisfaction. So I say that just to make sure that I'm not coming from sour grapes. I get along with my colleagues, and they, as I say, they use my books and the like. However, it's like a lover's quarrel. And the other side of it is that I am dismayed by the extent to which the university today has slipped into well, my word for it is scientistic mode, which in this context means simply the only kind of knowledge which is reliable and worthwhile and so on is objective knowledge which you can empirically prove and so on. And this has driven religious studies teachers, who are the new kids on the block, to emphasize the objective, demonstrable aspects of religion, like what are their holy days and what do they do in their rituals. Objective, historical, empirical fact. Now, those are not unimportant, but if I can quote scripture, these things ought ye to have done and not left the others undone. The real source of religion is inward. It's what goes on in the interstices of the personal life of the individual. And if we leave that out, why then it's like a Gorna Manual, which would talk entirely about leaves and flowers and size of plants, but leave out the matter of the soil and what goes on in that kind of process. So it's the totally objectivizing and giving the outside external fact, but scant attention to what the inner vision that quickened the light and actually caused the outpourings of these manifestations of holy days and ritual, not attending to the real source, core, generating spirit that produces these things. So that's what I've had to live in. But I've had no trouble. I've never been called by anybody as that I'm trying to proselytize. It's very easy to do. In fact, Flannery O'Connor put it wonderfully that, you know, the Catholic story writer. She said what she tries to do in her stories is to get people looking and glued in a certain direction, and then hit them over the head with a 2x4 and they won't know what struck them. So what one does is, and it's very easy, I don't talk about what I believe, I talk about what they believe. And that makes it objective because I'm reporting as accurately as I can. But I find that if I do justice to what they believe, it is of such nobility and worth and power, or it would not have generated these traditions and millions of people over there. If it did not have that worth, why then the students will see that worth, and I don't have to argue for it. Now that's for that problem.
Where are you today that you know you weren't 5 months ago in your spiritual realization?
Well, I won't duck the question, and I will answer it. There is a very definite content to this. I only hesitate because the answer may not be as new age upbeat as one might. What I am doing, really, to speak very personally, is to come to grips, to cope with, and to manage the aging problem in all kinds of ways. 2 hearing aids, the world gets more quiet, energy declines. I don't have to go through all the signs of that. It's common knowledge, but it's one of these things that you know all your life, but never learn until you work, till you come hand-to-hand combat with it. So it's like the prospect and to the reality to a certain degree of sort of phasing out. Now, Baba Ram Dass had it just clobber him with a stroke that paralyzed that, and his problem is to work his way back to any kind of articulation with the public. But there's no one way that it comes, but it comes in one way or another. And it's coming at me incrementally, but you mentioned 5 months, and that's intuitively, you may be somebody may be watching over this and guiding your question. But we moved to a different house with less dependence on driving and fewer. There were 39 steps up to our old house, so we knew it wasn't our old house. So there'd been that change and a kind of sense of withdrawing, and the hardest thing is moving from a stance of giving, which, for better or worse, is the way I've sort of poured my life into in the mold that I've given it, to receiving, and in the acute case, of course, of depending on others. Now, so you asked, where am I? Where I wasn't 5 years ago, where I was back in the old life. Well, that's where I am.
What?
You said, I heard you say once that the tragedies in life are necessary for growth. Do you think possibly that learning to be dependent and not just a giver is one of the reasons we might live to grow old?
Oh, of
to
course.
Learn that lesson?
Of course. And that is the present challenge that I have. And it will get worse rather than better. But it's a very severe and a different kind of challenge. Oh, I think this is the test. Mm-hmm. I think the final test, I'm hesitant to move to a kind of superlative here, but let me just stay with it. The final test, and if I put it in traditional religious language, is can we glorify God through our death? Now, we had a daughter who died about 3 years ago at the age of 50 in a horrendous kind of death, sarcoma cancer, and she did that. She did that. And if only, well, that would be my challenge, not to become bitter, resentful, complaining, but to really glorify God in these situations. If we cannot do it then, why, I won't go so far as saying that our whole life has been a failure, but at least we have not risen to the supreme test, and as the Indians would say, we have to come back and do it better next time.
That leads to one of my questions. We're talking about, you're talking about spiritual growth throughout our lives and the lessons that life presents us with, or you call them tests, I guess.
Challenge, opportunities.
I like to call them opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you believe, have you come to believe, after all your studying and thought, that our spirit does continue to learn after we leave this body?
Oh yes. I have a friend, Charles Tart, who teaches psychology at Davis, and his entire focus has been on the paranormal in psychology. And I happened to be present when a student asked him that question. And he said, well, all my research and my own personal intuition convinced me that when I die, my body dies, my consciousness will remain. However, he said, what I haven't a clue to is whether I will then recognize it as my consciousness. So I think I would go that route. I'll lean on my specialist, Charles Tart.
Does this possibly, have you any notion of whether we might reincarnate to continue to learn?
Well, I'm appealing to my friends here, but Ramdas gives me my answer to that. One year when I was teaching at Cal, I somehow came up through questions that there were a number of students who were very interested in Ramdas. And so I called them up and said, would you be up for driving across the bay and having an evening with students that are really interested in you? A gracious man, he did. And in the course of that evening, a student asked him, right out, do you believe in reincarnation? And, you know, that master of words, without blinking an eye, he said, it's there when I need it. Which I think is brilliant, and that articulates more succinctly than I could have my belief. That is, but let me spell it out one more step. I do not believe that we complete the journey within the body. Now, there may be rare exceptions. The Indians would call it Jiva Mukta, fully enlightened being. But I guess I'm so still impressed with the mortal corals that and even Christ says, why callest thou me good? But I think for most of us, something needs to be done after death. But whether it's done on this plane, by coming into another body in this world, or goes on in what the Tibetans would call other bardos, other spiritual levels of reality. I'm not sure. That's negotiable.
What do you think, well, what is your concept of what happens when we go through this growth process and reach what Pierre Teilhard de Chardin calls the omega point?
Right. Well, now are you asking, does it happen, or what's it like?
Uh-huh, yes.
Both. Well,
what's your idea of that? Yes.
What's it like? You know, don't ask me for a preview of coming attractions. It will be attractive for sure, but here, as so often, I find it is very useful to take a leaf from the notebook of science. Now, science tells us that there is a quantum world which we cannot fathom with our particular instruments of knowing. It is just riven with paradox. And Feynman said shortly before his death, there's no way to put quantum physics into ordinary language. Now, if nature is mysterious, as we now know, are we to think that the human spirit is less mysterious? And so, therefore, to try to couch those infinite truths into finite minds would be dogs trying to their noses to sort of tease out what Einstein's intelligence would be like. What we find is that there are two basic spiritual personality types, sort of the spiritual counterparts of Jung's for psychological personality type, and the two, he would say, introverted and extroverted, but for the spiritual life, it's exoteric or esoteric. Never mind those words, but for exoterics, selfhood is very important, and they don't want to lose themselves. As Ramakrishna put it when he was in that mode, he said, I want to taste sugar. I don't want to be sugar. However, there's the other type that, as it goes along, comes to a point where it progressively loses interest in the self. And if we put it in terms of the beatific vision, the beatific vision is so arresting, so commanding, that 100% of their attention is focused on that, and they have zero for the question of who is looking at this vision. And that's when the dewdrop slips into the shining sea as the exoteric. So there are these two views, and you put it, and that's the way I would put it, that the esoteric sort of follows after you've had enough of yourself. amazing how long it takes to have enough of oneself. Why, then you're ready to drop the self and move on. There's one problem, a little awkwardness there, because it sort of makes those of us who hold that view a little superior. We're a little further along than the other. Well, not in every respect, maybe in a little sliver of insight.
I try to think of spiritual pursuit as being non-competitive, but I think it's in our nature to become competitive, unconsciously or otherwise.
Yeah.
I realize time is limited, and I realize there's not going to be an opportunity for you to expand upon different ideas that maybe the two of us might want to put forth. But having said that, I'd like to run a list by you. What's your understanding, your feeling about past life regression?
A disinterest. It may be true, it may not. It is not important for me, and I don't think I would get any play into spiritism.
Meditation.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And that is in one form or another, and the line between meditation and prayer is a fine line. Generally speaking, one thinks more of silence in meditation and articulation in prayer. But it's somewhat arbitrary. But those are the tools of the human spirit. I can't imagine a serious spiritual quest that does any end run around those.
Vision quests, meditation of retreats of silence for 2 days or 2 weeks. Retreats.
Yeah.
The value spiritually of a guided retreat or a self-guided retreat for people.
Right.
What do you feel about those?
I think retreats are immensely important. All the spiritual leaders not only were launched through them, but kept going back. The Buddha, for example, after his enlightenment, why, he built into the Sangha, the order of monks, what is called the Rains Retreat. When the monsoons came slamming in and turned India into a sea of mud, the monks would come back from the dusty paths where they were preaching the Dharma, and for 3-month retreat they would meditate. And the Buddha would do it also every day. And the masters, Jesus, would go and pray all night, kind of withdrawn. Toynbee called it withdrawal and return. If we don't withdraw, we have nothing to return with.
Do you think many people in the West today are reticent of embarking upon a retreat because of fear of discovering what they might find about themselves?
Yes. Eric Fromm said once that if you take the average American and put him or her in a motel room with no television, no radio, no USA Today, no reading matter for 24 hours, why, he would be coming to me, a therapist, to deal with me. He would be driven up the wall. We don't know, I'm generalizing, but you're quite right. In terms, we are extroverted, active, go, bombarded with sensations, impulse, sound bite. To be quiet, be still, and know. You're quite right. And Kendra, by the way, meditation is her path of Vipassana meditation, and she has actually done 4 of the 3-month retreats at Barre, Massachusetts. 3 months of no reading, no writing, no speaking, and downcast eyes. You don't look in anyone else's hat. Now, and what she reports from, and by the way, more than half of the people there usually psychologists in one form of practice or another. But the first 3 months, most people find terribly difficult for just the reason you targeted, because they've never been quiet long enough to let all that material that they've tamped down in the unconscious, but when the lid comes off, it's terrifying.
There's a dual adjustment required here, I would guess. When your wife Kendra comes home from one of these 3-month retreats, how does it impact you?
Very personal question, but no, I don't like the duck question. The first time, all hell broke loose. But then, because there'd been a lot that came up, she was in a state, and then so we had to deal with that, a lot of stuff to deal with. Fortunately, providentially, why we worked our way through with it, and with each passing one, it was more and more delightful, until the last one left me feeling a little unclean. What is it going to be like to be married with somebody who is beatified?
And the process has never had enough intrigue for you to succumb to it.
Well, I have done a number of 10-day retreats, but two things. First of all, I tend to be involved in what I'm doing, and this is an admission. It's not a pride, but I don't seem to be able to carve out that much time to do it. Probably do me, I'm sure it do me a lot of good. But people have different aptitudes, and Kendra has a wonderful aptitude for meditation. I have a so-so aptitude, and I'm not sure that it would, that particular, it's only one mode of spiritual journeying, would be quite as, I'm more, to use the Hindu 4 yogas, I'm more a jhana yogi, and she is a Raj yogi who goes through direct experience for it.
Your comments on a few more aspects of spirituality. Miracles. A friend of mine tells me, who grew up in the Philippines, what we think of as miracles in the West are not our everyday, not everyday events, but not superhuman, but merely normal, natural in the East. Yet I think even in the East there is a concept of miracles. Do you give it much thought?
Yeah.
Or is it like...
No, it's a valid thing. And I think we can divide it into two parts. First of all, there are what the Sanskrit, the word is siddhis, or powers. And certain people can cultivate certain powers. By the way, in passing, certain people are born with certain powers. But then a miracle is different from that in that it happens through divine action and is not something which is humanly produced even by added. I value all three. I validate. I think all three are genuine. Miracles depend a great deal on the climate of opinion. Even Jesus, when he went to areas where nobody believed in him, there was no faith, why, he couldn't do any miracle. And so I think we have developed a kind of shield through our excessive materialism, scientific outlook. It has inculcated an attitude of disbelief in them, and as a consequence, they are not able to get through as often as they were in the past. That's my own personal view on it.
Spiritual personalities. I'm tempted to ask where you are in your understanding and of people from Pope John Paul II to Billy Graham, but I'm actually more interested right now in knowing of your awareness of an emerging world personality, national personality, spiritual figure, whose teachings, whose spiritual path is growing in prominence, that might be not a household name yet among people throughout America, throughout the world?
Yes.
Are there people on the horizon like that?
No. I see people that I value to the heaven. One just passed away, Mother Teresa, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Thomas Merton, a Native American that I was very close to before he died, are just paragons and just so heartening to the rest of us of the possibilities of the spiritual quest. But as far as any concrete figure, all of those were set within existing tradition. And as for anyone coming over the horizon that might generate a new religion with some of the scope of the traditional one, they may be there, but I don't see them.
What about the attention that's being, not that this follows on the last comment, but the attention that's being focused for the last decade and a half on Medjugorje in Bosnia, former Yugoslavia, about the apparition of the Virgin Mary, which I don't believe has been sanctioned by the Vatican yet, but nonetheless it continues to draw tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, I just don't know. I'm not dismissing of it or in any way supercilious or incredulous, but I just don't know. There may be something. I suspect that there is something valid there, but whether it is exactly as the overt reports indicate, I just do not know.
And in the south of India, there's a 71, 72-year-old man, Sai Baba, who is attracting global attention, albeit still not to the numbers that most people are aware of. I dare say most people aren't aware of his name.
Right. Most are not. Well, again, when I had only 4 hours in his presence, but he was in silence at that time, and so there was no discussion. And my own experience, not that my sensibilities are exceptionally honed, but I felt something there. Now that's all I can say. Now, when you go beyond that, why then you get this polarization of true believers who tell the most amazing stories, and I can tell you one that I'm maybe one of 2 or 3 that know, but then the other side, there are those who claim he's a charlatan, the Bay Area skeptics, and they say, well, we can do everything he can do. Well, let me bring out my little anecdote here. It happened to be when I was teaching at Syracuse, one of my colleagues was an Indologist. He had a sabbatical, did his research in India, and came back, and we asked him to mount a colloquium to report what he had learned. And this was open to the public, and in the course of the question period, somebody asked him about Sai Baba, and he gave, I don't even remember what he said, he had not seen him on that trip and didn't have much interest in that kind of thing. But at the colloquium, somebody noticed that there was a face that didn't usually turn up. And he was an Indian, obviously, who had come to hear this report on religion in India. So somebody turned to him and said, well, Professor Daniel Smith doesn't know anything about Sai Baba, but the question was asked to you as an Indian, what do you think? And he said, well, I'm an engineering student, I'm a scientist, I don't have that kind of interest. But he said, it does happen that my mother is a devotee, and the only way that I interfaced with Sai Baba was that as a boy, it was part of my daily chores to wipe the ashes off of his photograph that hung on our wall. Now, I'd like to see the Bay Area skeptics duplicate that, but then, of course, when one gets into these anomalies, why, objectively speaking, they're never determinable.
Well, it's very curious that you should reveal to us that story. Part of our trip visiting the Bay Area will be to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours north to a town with the name of your, to a town whose name is, I'm not sure, okay, where a phenomenon like this is reported, as it is throughout the world, as it is in the story that you just gave. I'm intrigued by this, and you've titillated us with revealing 2 or 3 stories. Would you feel comfortable sharing one more story about Sai Baba that you alluded to, in addition to the one you already have?
Well, I think Jody knows this better than I. It's Maynard Ferguson, and even though you know it better than I, do you want me to say it?
Yes. I don't know it.
Well, Maynard Ferguson has been for 20 years or so a devotee, and though we know him, this didn't come directly from him, but from a friend, a mutual friend, that Maynard, that Sai Baba said to him on one occasion, "I know that you're a very famous trumpeter, and I can believe that," and I don't know if he had heard him play, but he said, "Your music still needs a little more light. And so I'm going to give you this ring so that when you play it, why then from the lights that are playing on you, it will sparkle and it will give more light into you." And with that he produced the largest diamond that Maynard had ever seen and handed it to him.
I didn't know that.
But on his way to his hotel, why, Maynard became scared, frightened. Here he was walking around with how many $1,000,000 in it. And so he hurried to his room, locked the door, buried the ring in his underwear, tried to sleep but couldn't sleep much. Morning he got up and opened the drawer. The ring was gone. So he goes back to Sai Baba and said, "What kind of a giver are you? You give me this wonderful treasure and then you take it away." And Baba said, "Well, that's because you became frightened. I don't want to frighten you, so I just took away the cause of your fright." However, he said, "You still need a little light in your music, so I'm going to give you a smaller ring. Please ring that." And he did that.
That's a delightful
You
story.
can match that against maybe more authentic accounts, but that's the way it came through to me.
Well, I've got a couple of final unrelated questions, but I'd like to ask Jody if she would like to follow up on that in any way, shape, or form, or some other questions that you haven't asked yet.
Well, do you remember the three ways of experiencing the fire? The
Yeah.
Sufis' 3 ways?
Yes.
And you told Bill Moyers that you had experienced the Sufis' fire, had been burned by the Sufis' fire. And you described it, you said, "There are moments when I feel that everything is in place and life makes sense." And those are moments of elation when there are no doubts. I paraphrase slightly, but
Yeah.
do you want to say more about that at all, or?
Well, simply to affirm that they exist, and epiphanies, they're sometimes called, and everybody gets them. We've just been reading together a book. The background is the Civil War, and it's a love story. The young woman is separated from her lover and hope may never see him again, roaming around trying to exist. But even for her, and I almost remember when it came in with agonies, ordeals that seem never to live up right, and the words were, on a day such as this, she could not imagine how her world could be improved. She did not think it could be done. So those moments come, and they are epiphanies, and they come gratuitously to everybody with varying degrees of intensity and frequency. But of course our problem is they are encouragement, but of course it's not our human lot to hold them in place. We never get life pinned like a ball of mercury that we try to get pinned under our thumb and it goes scooting out. And that's the way it is with life. We never get it under control. But those things are real, and they are just such a blessing.
You know, you spoke about dealing with aging. I will consider myself so fortunate if I do half as good a job as you have. And is it your spiritual path that gives you such bright eyes and such a bright smile?
No, I think I was consciously resisting those words, but I didn't really hear how your sentence ended.
There's a joy that emanates from you, Huston, that's remarkable for someone of any age. Do you attribute that to your spiritual life?
Well, again, I want to say two things. That insofar as your perception is accurate, why yes, I would give it all to the spiritual path, but also the powers that drew and elicited that path. But the other part is, and without wishing to throw cold water on a life that needs no more cold water thrown on it, I think it's always well to remember that everyone has, or put it differently, no one is as good as his public best or as bad as his private worst. And you see me and Ted, well, both of you, in Cleveland the other time we were together, and my public best. That's all right. That's quite good. As for my private worst, we will not probe that question.
I have just one final question, and then I'd like to ask you for one final comment. Actually, comments, if you want to make them plural, fine. The last question I will try to express as clearly as I can, but I have trouble with it. My greatest growth over the last decade has come through a heightened understanding of the intuitive voice in us all. That if we become aware of it and exercise it as a muscle, it sort of becomes a pipeline to the water at the end of the well, where there's a limitless amount of water. But that discernment is necessary, and that exercising of the muscle is necessary, and the intention for it to come forth is necessary.
No, I would affirm everything you said. Well put. The character and the literalness of the word voice, we can circle a little bit. We have one friend, actually, she's blown into town from Williamsburg, and we'll be having dinner with her on Friday. Very literally hears a voice, and it directs her as to what she should do. Now, I have nothing of that talent, but if we generalize voice and to the most generic formulation, namely follow the light where it leads, I think it is very true. And if there is no more valid, dependable guide in life than that statement.
Yet there seems to be little, if any at all, guidance in teaching people how to find that source of thought, creativity, imagination, intuitive voice within us all. Why is that?
Well, there's a growing interest. It's still small, but I think the very fact that you're here, the very fact that you will be showing this to various groups, as I understand you. I mean, I'm not sure that this would have been going on, probably to some degree, but certainly not the extent that it is today. So even though it's it will need all the ounces of your strength, the collective strength you can give it, nevertheless, there are signs of encouragement.
And the last comment is yours, if you choose to make any, and that is, the camera is pointed at you. My take on truth is the truth the day I utter it, and 3 days from now I may have a different version of the same truth I just commented on. Where are you, if you choose to relate to us, with your truth right now about Huston Smith and all else that matters?
I am not accustomed to the portentousness of these questions and the pronouncements that they elicit. But let me see what I can do. What is the truth for me today? Yes. Well, I go back to your earlier question of what is the opportunity, the challenge for me today, and I've already spoken of that as coming to terms with aging and phasing out of this world. So the most important truth to me is Huston, realize that this is the challenge, the opportunity of the moment, and give it your very best. Now you asked, did you ask, that's me, but did you ask, or about the world?
Yes.
Well, about the world, I have a more concrete thing. I feel that the Whitehead said that the two most powerful forces in human history are science and religion. But then many people recognize that, but then he went on to say that the most important thing about the human future is how these two most powerful forces settle down into relationship with one another. Now, I think that for the past 300 years it's been very bad because there's been a jockeying who is going to pronounce on the way things are for our society. And at the early 300 years ago, when the church had all the power, it didn't use it very well. And now science has the power, and there's still a kind of contest going on. Now, I think the truth for the world, and meaning by that for human history, is to stay and to work with this problem with all the intelligence and the generosity that we have within us, to see these things, these two forces, as complementary allies, which they can be and should be, and I have hope in the coming century will become more and more, rather than as contestants trying to own the turf of our collective worldview.
Huston Smith, thank you very much. This is admittedly a very unorthodox interview.
Not with this, the two of you. It's a joy.
And speaking of truth, let's conclude by simply saying this is the truth for this first day of October 1997 in Berkley, California, and we are greatly in your debt. Thank you very much.
It's all beautiful.